I'm going to be talking today about what I refer to as the obfuscated transaction. Now, much of what I'm about to say builds at least partially upon certain things that were stated or said in two videos, very, very good videos that Girl Writes What, aka Karen Strawn, put out a few days ago. The first one being the quandry of consent, and the second being the quandry of consent part 2. I will, of course, be linking to those videos. And in those videos, she talks about the problem of consent and the peculiarities of female sexuality and other things related to that. And she addresses specific comments made by people. And I want to build upon some of that. So I actually would recommend watching those videos first, but if you don't feel like it or don't like Girl Writes What or whatever, then don't do so. In any event, I'm not going to be making necessarily direct references to it, but indirect. So in the quandary of consent, if you were to really sum it up in a nutshell, it seems to be about just how confused and muddled female sexuality is and with respect to its public image and its public presentation, which is to say, women literally, and there's a feminist who concedes this in this video, saying, well, yeah, I was raped, but then I married him because I kind of liked it. He turned out to be a cool guy, even though in every technical sense the woman was raped. In other cases, just because the guy doesn't decide to stick around, it's rape after the act. Now, a very simple solution to the quandary of consent is, of course, abstinence, just not having sex. And, well, there you go. Problem solved, right? In fact, one of my subscribers who's not part of MGTOW, which is absolutely fine, I welcome all, commented on an older video of mine where I talked about something that all my old subscribers know. I don't deal with women or have sex with them. So if you don't have sex, I mean, how can you tolerate that or survive that? So it just goes to show that acute perception of need. Now, I think we do need to distinguish between need and want, and I don't think it's a need in the sense that you're going to keel over and drop dead merely because you haven't had sex. We need food, water, we need to piss and shit and sleep, but these are very different things from sex. Sex, I would say, is an acute desire akin to something like crack addiction. The crack addict will also feel an acute desire, which he will then describe as a need for the crack in order to feel better. And there will be withdrawal symptoms. So that is a solution, but obviously that's not a solution for most men. Most men, their perception of most men is such that sex is a need, perceived as a need rather than an acute want or an acute desire. And really there's not much mincing of words here. You're not going to convince most men just not to have sex with women. And I have no illusions about that. And as always, I don't prescribe my lifestyle or what I do in my life to other people. So, you're free to do whatever you want. So I'm not going to spend too much time about simply not having sex. That's not a particularly good solution for consent, or the quandary of consent, as the title of Girl Writes What's video goes. I want to talk about, as I once said at the beginning, the obfuscated transaction. Now, much about, as I said in the videos of Girl Writes What, it's about the fact that it's just not clear in the eyes of women after the act as to whether or not it was rape. And even when it is officially rape, they sometimes change their mind. And why? Well, a commenter, I think it was a female, actually left a comment that she had addressed in the second part of the video, talking about the transactional nature of sex between men and women. That is, women offering sex in the form of a transaction. Now, of course, that's absolutely nothing new in MGTOW circles. We've been talking about that very clearly, very lucidly for years. So that in itself is not particularly exceptional. But what I do want to focus on is the fact that the transaction is not clear. That is the issue at hand, actually. It's not the problem with sex with women is not that it's a transaction per se. You could argue that everything's a transaction. We're going to focus on this particular instance. The problem is rather that it's obfuscated, it's obscure, it's not clear. It tends to go whichever way the wind blows, and by that I mean it rests on the whims and the emotional state of the woman after the act, and perhaps even several days after the act, how she feels about the man. It rests upon whether the man stays or not. I mean, so there's no concrete definition in the emotional mind of the woman of what rape is, because It can be a technical rape, and the woman, as presented in that video, such as a feminist, can actually marry the guy and have a good time with him. And if the guy doesn't end up pleasing her or give her a good feeling, then he can be fucked up Schitt's Creek. So the real issue with all sexual transactions between men and women is the obscure nature of it. There is a solution to this, I think, and it's actually related to the problem with modern marriage as well. But let me go into this. Now, I myself, I don't patronize prostitutes. I just don't deal with them and don't have sex with them. But I think the best solution for men who are aware of the quandary of consent and are concerned is, in fact, patronizing prostitutes. And let me tell you why. A really good analogy, I think, that Obfuscated offered in the video was the idea of giving out pancakes for free. And then with the frequent occurrence after you give out the pancakes of getting something in return, which is what she used to draw an analogy between women and sex, which is to say women are giving out the pancakes. They're not actually saying that they're selling them. They're not actually saying that they have a product, but they're giving them out and they're expecting to get something in return. 70% out of the time, and I'm making that number up, they get something in return, but 30% they don't, and then they depict that as something wrong, as sort of robbery. Even though there's no official sale of pancakes, there's no business actually involved. It's an expectation. An expectation without a set of rules, without a non-obscure state of affairs is a bit complicated, and of course that is why everything gets so muddied and muddled. But let's move that a little bit, that analogy, to something that's not just a giver away of pancakes, but rather a pancake house. You're an owner of a pancake house, or maybe you make street pancakes and you sell them at a cheap price to people, and you have a mobile food truck of some sort. Well, all of you know, very basic economics, if your pancakes are very stale and don't taste good, your business will probably fail. It's not going to do very well, obviously. If they're terrible, you're going to lose business right away. If you sell good pancakes, you're going to get repeat customers who want good pancakes. It's very clear in this context, if you're a seller or maker of pancakes, what constitutes a good deal, what's a good transaction, and what exactly you, the pancake maker, the seller of pancakes, job and task is, and what the task and job of the customer is. The customer gives you money. He expects that you make good pancakes for him, and that's pretty much it. Very clear. Very little obfuscation. It's actually not too dissimilar with the prostitute. The prostitute is a businesswoman offering services to a man, to a patron, to a customer. In order to ensure that she gets repeat visits, repeat customers, and indeed the same customer visiting her again, patronizing her, she needs to ensure that her services are good. Many times, very often, from what I hear, there are very clear boundaries and clearly delineated rules, what costs what, how much it costs, etc. But one thing she can't do is be really obscure and take the risk that there won't be any repeat customer for her. She needs to make sure the customer is pleased, by and large, and that's how she ensures that her business is running well. Same thing with the pancakes, basically. Only that in the case of the prostitute, you are availing yourself as a man of her various pungent holes and orifices, but that's not really a huge difference as far as the action, the practice is concerned, as selling pancakes or running a pancake house. High quality product usually means repeat service, repeat customers coming to that service and wanting more and more of it over time. Now, in an obfuscated model, you don't get that. There's no clearly delineated rule. Nobody knows how much something costs, what's permissible, what's not. It's all kind of up in the air. And ultimately, it's all up to the whim of the woman, of the female, to decide either during the act, prior to the act, or after the act, even if that's a week after the fact. And this is the great danger, to my mind, and the problem with the whole quandary of consent. It's the obfuscation of what is permissible and what's not, and what is possible and what's not. And because women are fickle creatures, because they live essentially on an emotional whim, they tend not to be particularly analytical outside of the emotions of their own world and their own heads, you are very much left at the mercy of some seriously destructive forces given the laws that are in place. And I would also argue that this applies to modern marriage. Modern marriage is largely founded on the lovey-dovey, fluffy-wuffy ideas of feel-goodism. I need to feel good and be in love and so on and so forth. Whereas in previous eras, in previous times, it was either an official contract, and even when it wasn't, it was pretty clear what the quote-unquote obligations of the participants were. It was a business deal, a long-term, indeed lifetime business deal, and each member participating in the contract had to fulfill his or her end. Usually it was the man doing his thing and the woman bringing up the children and sucking his dick for doing his thing. Now, that, once again, is not clearly delineated in modern marriage, and so it's up to the whim of the person. Most often, we all know, with the average 70% divorce rate initiated by women, the woman to decide whether or not she's happy and how the marriage is going. It's not based on the fulfillment of customer versus business person, or providing services to a customer, as is the case with prostitution, or very clearly delineated rules and obligations, such as, I'll give you $60. For $60, you can touch my tits, I'll suck your dick, and you can fuck me doggy style. But if you want to fuck me anally, that's going to run you another $120. And everything's clearly delineated there. You know what's permissible and what's not. Simply not the case with a marriage contract. And it's certainly not the case with your average sexual encounter with women, or indeed any relationship. And so it's really the obfuscated nature of the transaction that's the problem. It's not that the transaction is a problem. Everything on some level is a transaction. It's just that most transactions are pretty clear. You want to eat a hamburger, it costs $10 because it's a gourmet one or whatever. You pay for it, you get a gourmet hamburger. Maybe it's bad, maybe it's good. If it's bad, you're not going to go back. Maybe you'll bitch about the service. If it's good, maybe you'll come back at a later date. Simple. Same with prostitution. And ideally, and I've said this before, what we need in society is to sort of defluffify and get rid of all this feel-goodism that's just enthralled all of us, most of us. This idea that there's some greater component than the transactional value, and to the extent that there is any greater component, that it's somehow of greater importance than the transactional value. The transactional value of sex needs to be cleanly and neatly defined, as is the case with the prostitution, the patron visiting the prostitute offering a service, just like any other business. If we could do that on a society-wide scale, if we could do that in marriage, I think we would have far fewer problems, because people would have, particularly men, would have a very good idea of the female's obligations and his obligations. We don't have that, and that is, I would argue, one of the greatest sources of the problems that we human beings face in these relationship/marriage/sexual contexts, that it's just not known. Everything is an unknown, and the man is sort of left at the mercy of whatever the woman decides, quite flippantly, on a whim. And that's not a good thing. Now, in order to get there, I think we probably would almost have to, quote-unquote, dehumanize most human beings, because, of course, most human beings, including men, run on emotion. They run on feel-goodism. They run on fluffy-wuffiness. And that is a huge problem. But I think it's undeniable that clear borders and a clear definition of what the business model is in the male-female sexual transaction, that this would be of great help to everyone involved. The man could do his deal, and the woman could do her deal, and everyone would come out, hopefully for the better, as is the case in most business situations. Everyone profits. The maker of Pancakes profits by making money, and the satisfied customer likes his butter maple syrup top pancakes because they taste good. Same case with the obfuscated transaction. Well, it wouldn't be obfuscated here. The other thing, and as I draw this video to a close, that I should mention is that in the obfuscated transaction, there's no obligation to provide good service, meaning you as a male can get absolutely lousy, horrible sex, and there's an expectation of getting something in return for that. Whereas a prostitute who routinely provides terrible sex and terrible blowjobs and massages or whatever it is that she does, she's not going to get repeat customers. You're certainly not going to go back there because it's a ripoff. But with a woman, outside of the official ranks of prostitution, what you get is this extremely obscure situation where you have obligations set upon you, obligations that are almost entirely filled in her mind and flowing in her mind. They're not actual obligations that are down on paper or obligations you're aware of as a man, that she sort of conjured up, despite the fact that maybe she didn't want to suck your dick, or maybe the sex was shit, etc., and so on and so forth. That, to my mind, makes the obfuscated transaction all the more insidious, because you don't know what you're getting. And unlike a normal business deal, as with the Pancakes, or buying electronics, or having sex with a prostitute, it's simply an unknown as to whether or not she's going to come after you. If you're a dissatisfied customer, let's say you have a couple of dates and hook up with a chick and fuck her, and she refuses to suck your dick, and you don't like that, it's your right as a customer, to my mind, to not patronize her anymore. That is, don't go out with her anymore, don't see her anymore. To her mind, she might feel that you've ripped her off and you've wasted her time because, I don't know, you didn't spend enough on dinner or the film or whatever. That is an acute danger there. So what we actually need to get rid of the quandary of consent is to introduce very clearly delineated rules, at the very least an oral contract where it's very clear what's expected, and if either party does not fulfill that end, then then you don't have to engage in that business. The woman doesn't need to offer the sex, the man doesn't need to have sex. This would go such a long way to fix so many of the problems we have with this quandary of consent, with marriage, with all manner of things. And yet we who are stuck in the realm and world of feelings as a primary absolute, well, I think most people would struggle with that. It's unfortunate, but I think it's clear what the problem is, and there is a clear solution to the problem. We need to just make this a very clear business transaction, get rid of the feely stuff, the fluffy wuffy stuff, and problem solved, basically. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say on that matter. Do check out Girl Writes What's videos. Karen Straughn's videos are quite good. I would recommend watching them before this one, in case you've already gotten to the end. Everyone take care and enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.